Hello Form 5, this is the last one for this weekend for you. Preparation for tomorrow if you're doing a little tiny bit of last minute revision tonight on your English Literature Paper 1 for the Edexcel exam board, on the Inspector Calls text specifically, but obviously the things here would apply to any text. They would also be transferable across to most exam boards, although be careful if you're not on Edexcel because your requirements could be slightly different for the modern play. So just a quick walk through tomorrow's exam, thinking about what do we need to do to maximise our chances of getting those top marks. So first of all, with this particular section B on Literature Paper 1 for Edexcel students, remember how much time you have. Your section B is your post-1914 literature, the British play or the British novel. You get to choose one question and every text has got 2 for you to choose from. You have 50 minutes for you to plan, write and check an answer to this text. So you have a lot of time. So how are you going to use that time really wisely? Remember, I always tell my students, read the question really carefully before you do anything else. Read it and choose which one of the 2 you're going to do. Take a good minute to 2 minutes to read through that question and really think about what it's asking you before you choose which one. You may rule one out absolutely instantly because you just go, I can't answer that. And then look at the other one. Or it may be that both of them look really good and you're a bit torn. So read them carefully and think. Then spend 5 minutes planning everything you want to say, because if you put your ideas together at the beginning, you will not have to keep on stopping during your writing to think, what do I say next? What do I say next? You'll have plenty that you can say. You might even want to rule out some of the things that you say and just choose your best 3 points to talk about, because if you try to cover too much, you're going to run out of time. Although you have 50 minutes, as you can see, you're only going to write for about 35 minutes. That's about the maximum you can allow yourself to write. You can possibly push that to 40 minutes if you plan quickly, and especially if you know that your spag and your writing is very reliable and you don't need to do a lot of checking. Certainly for every single pupil I teach, that's not true. You need to check, and I think that's true for the vast majority of the country. Make sure you check your spag really carefully, because for Edexcel there are up to 8 marks available for your accuracy. That's hugely generous. That's enough to change you 1.5 grades. So do take time to check. And then the last thing you want to do is reread that answer the whole way through from beginning to end and make sure it makes sense and you said what you want to say. Okay, so how can you get full marks? Well, make sure you understand the question first. Here's 2 questions I have mocked up this weekend. They are based on fairly standard sorts of questions that Edexcel and AQA have both asked in the past. So the first one, we're focusing on character. We've got Sheila and Eric and the way that they change. The second one is focusing on a theme, and that's the theme of accepting responsibility. I really struggled to mock up some questions for this one because there were no obvious areas that haven't been covered by Edexcel in the past. And also when I looked at AQA past questions, pretty much everything's been covered. So they could go anywhere. So here's 2 that you could have a look at. You could pause and make a note of those now if you want to, or screenshot them. And maybe 5 minutes spent planning each question this evening will help you to revise the play really well before you go to bed at a sensible time. Okay, so let's have a look at this question first. Sheila, passionately, you're pretending everything's just as it was before. I'm not, says Eric. Sheila, no, but the others are. In what ways do Sheila and Eric change during the play? And a reminder, you must refer to context of the play in your answer. So this one comes from near the end of the play, after the revelation that the inspector might have been a fraud, might have been tricking them. And Mr. and Mrs. Burling and Gerald are acting as though everything's okay now and nothing actually happened. Whereas Sheila and Eric are realizing that everything they said happened did happen. And they are actually frightened, in Sheila's words, by the way their parents are behaving. So that's one possible question. The other question here, Sheila, everything we said happened really happened. If it didn't end tragically, then that's lucky for us, but it might have done. And explore the significance of accepting responsibility in the play. You must refer to the context of the play in your answer. So again, this is from the end of the play, and it's Sheila being terrified at the way that her parents seem to not be considering that what they said they did was what they did. Because now they haven't been caught out by the death of a girl, then it doesn't matter the way that they behaved. Sheila, however, understands that it does matter because they have behaved in appalling ways, and she is accepting that responsibility where the others don't seem to be. Okay, so how are you going to get full marks? Make sure you plan carefully before you begin. Think about your chosen question. Which are the most significant moments where that theme or that character is really important to the plot? Quickly list for yourself, and you can pause the video now and do that with whichever question you've chosen to answer. Where would you think are maybe 4, 5, 6 moments in the play where it's really significant, that theme of responsibility? Or when you see Eric and Sheila changing, or any other exam question that you are practicing planning this evening. So then have a think, how does that theme develop and change during the play, or how do those characters develop and change during the play? A story won't be a story if things don't develop and change. So here we see our characters changing, or we see that theme of responsibility developing through the course of the play. And finally, think, what does the audience start to understand as they watch each key moment that you've picked out? What is the playwright or the author asking them to think about? What is being pointed out to them? How are we interacting with that theme or with those characters in order to make the story real? So make sure you've got plenty of notes for yourself before you even begin to write. Now, knowing the demands of the question, this mark scheme is identical for Edexcel pupils to the Macbeth mark scheme for the part B question, where you write about the whole text. So we're looking for an assured personal response with a high level of engagement with the text, a critical style with maturity, perceptive interpretations. We're looking for discerning references where they are an integral part of your essay and fully supported from the text, and an excellent understanding of the context and the interrelationship between the text and context. There we go. And I've just highlighted those keywords for you on the level 5, getting 17 plus marks out of 20. My apologies, that should be out of 32. We'll have a look at the previous slide for that one. Pause and go back. Now remember that there is this small but important AO4 mark for Edexcel students here. AQA, you get your 1 to 4 marks for different parts of the exam. But for us, you either have the threshold performance, which is where you've got reasonable accuracy. If you've got lots and lots and lots of errors, then you're only going to get 1 mark, possibly even 0, especially if the examiner struggles to read what you've written. So long as the examiner can read what you've written, but there are lots of errors there, you'll get 1 or 2 marks, especially if you've used a good wide range of vocabulary and sentence structures and have got a good sustained essay. You should get 2 marks out of 8. Most students will get 3 or more, because most students, we're talking about 75% of students, have got reasonable accuracy. They call it considerable accuracy here for this band. And that's a really good wide range of vocabulary and sentence structures. And we're not having to look at words and think, oh, what did you mean? Because they're spelled so badly. Your spelling is either pretty accurate or is phonetically easy to understand. You cannot get 6, 7 or 8 marks unless you have got very, very few errors and a very good use of vocabulary and a wide range of sentence structures and a really tight essay. So you have got high performance if that is you. The majority of students are going to get 3 or 4 marks, possibly 5. What are you not marked for? It's worth remembering you're not marked in this question for AO2 analysis, language and structure. You don't need to hone in and zoom in tight on words and structures to say this word means this and that makes the reader think this. But you are still going to need to use lots of quotes and support your answer fully from the text, because that's going to reveal your thorough knowledge of the text and put you towards band 5. Okay, so I'm going to take this particular essay today. Sheila, you're pretending everything was just as it was before. Now I've put the word pretending in bold there because that makes me see Sheila's attitude straight away at the end of the play. She sees through her parents and that they're refusing to accept that what they did was what they did, whereas she does accept what she did. Eric bursts out with "I'm not," an exclamation mark there to show he's shouting that. And she says no, but the others are. She's placating him. And also the two of them are drawing into a team together. They're starting to become united against their parents as they both take some responsibility and their parents refuse to. So the key there is, in what ways do they change? So the whole essay needs to keep coming back to the word change. A useful thing you can do in that last 2 to 3 minutes when you're checking is just count how many times you've used that key word change during your essay. And if you've barely used it, quickly make sure you link your ideas back to that concept of them changing. Your essay must be focused the whole way through on all the different ways we see them change or not change during the play. And I've also highlighted context to remind me to make sure I've got that in there. So here's a few notes I've made for myself. So what are they like at the start of the play? They're both selfish, self-absorbed, very unaware of working classes. We also see Eric being a shifty and nervous character. They both seem to dislike each other and they don't seem to be friends. So that's a quick snapshot of what they're like at the start. When do they start to change? Well, for Sheila, as soon as her story is heard, she immediately accepts and reacts. She's very hard on her father, as is Eric, when he refuses to take responsibility, which again shows us their capacity to change, because they judge their father for not changing. And that is what starts to divide them from their parents and unite them as a partnership against the older parents. And then my last question to myself, what extent do they change? Well, they both accept their part in the story, and they both hate the fact that the parents don't and will not accept they acted wrongly. And even though it seems that no one died, the parents are still not capable of saying, well, I did do something wrong, whereas Eric and Sheila are. But I have a hesitation here personally for me in my interpretation of this play, and I wonder why they don't act when Eva and Daisy appears to still be alive and it seems like they could have a chance. Now I'm questioning, does this mean that they have not really changed when it comes down to it? They can see what they've done wrong, but they're actually not acting any differently. Or have they only just begun to take a little responsibility for themselves and they're not yet ready to fully accept their responsibility? Now, don't forget to make some context links. Here's 4 quick context links that I've realised I can scribble in. Those attitudes of the rich middle classes, remembering that the Burlings are middle class, but they are upper middle class. They're fairly wealthy. Mr. Burling does work hard, which keeps him in the middle class. His children do not have to work, which makes them very privileged indeed. Life for the wealthy and the privileged young females in particular, and males at the time, very, very different. Sheila has got a shopping and homemaking pretending lifestyle. She can host little parties, meet her friends, do a bit of shopping, direct cook to do some work, but she doesn't have to do anything herself. She doesn't even have to clean up after herself. The varsity lifestyle that Mr. Burling talks about for Eric, that means his privileged lifestyle going to Oxford or Cambridge University, in particular varsity only describes those 2 universities, which were basically the 2 that existed at the time when the play is set. He's got terrific privilege if he's accepted that lifestyle and entered into it. Not only has he had a private education or a grammar school education that's given him access through money or through ability. In our case, we know it's got to be money because Eric seems to have no ability, poor thing. But he has had a lifestyle that most people in society do not have. That's also protected him because he has not had to work, and therefore he has no understanding of what life is like for people who have to work. We've got impending social unrest. We're in a turning point in the 1910s. We've got increasing social unrest. We've got the threat of strikes beginning. We're leading towards the general strikes that are going to happen later on in the decade. The working classes are beginning to assert their rights. And we've got them unsettling the wealthy as they start having to acknowledge that these people exist and have voices for the first time ever. And Priestley obviously is looking back at that time period with the perspective of post-World War II, with all the enormous upheaval and social change, women going out to work suddenly, thousands and millions of people being killed off by the action, which leaves holes in society in the working classes and the wealthy classes, and women having to pick up the ropes there and take over in the factories where the injured and dead men are missing. Plus also the fact that having seen a whole different world and having saved their country, the people in 1946 saving their country twice are not necessarily now going to sit back quietly and be walked on by the upper classes. Now, just that reminder from Mr. Wendon. Thank you, Mr. Wendon. Treat your context like spice and sprinkle it over and stir it into the whole thing. Don't dump it in the corner. So, use a good essay framework. Start with a clear introduction, answer the question in 1 or 2 sentences and set out your main points in brief. Then make your points, flesh them out, make clear what's important about that plot and character development, what's it's adding to the story, how does the context help to add to its impact and help us to understand. Repeat that for 2 or more ideas. Always pick fewer points and develop them fully. Don't fall into the trap within spectacles about trying to talk about every single character. Pick the 3 that are really crucial. You can mention the others very briefly in a few sentences, but only dwell on 3 of them, because otherwise you will run out of time and say very little about all of it, rather than lots about a little. And then conclude by restating your points and answering that question again. So here's a really good strong introduction and conclusion. I have in the Teams assignment for my pupils attached the whole essay as a PDF. I am still trying to work out how to do that on YouTube for other students, but here you can see this good strong introduction. Just pause the video and have a read through that. And you can see how I'm setting out the argument very clearly at the beginning with the points I'm going to make, and how I'm concluding by making those points again at the end. And I've got a beautiful typo there in John Smooth's. I will correct that. So here's one paragraph, and you can see the way I'm targeting band 5 there with my critical assured comment at the beginning. A defining moment, perhaps. Now that's mature writing that accepts there may be other interpretations, but I'm saying this is mine. This is personal. This is what I think. Remember, it needs to be what you think, not trot out something you read somewhere. So a defining moment perhaps for Eric's ability to change is when he accepts that he was, and a good quote there to support it, was in that state when a chap easily turns nasty. Now notice I've replaced my argument with the words from the text to embed and integrate my quote to just make it a seamless part of my own writing. That's the best way to use the quotes. Don't say a defining moment for Eric's ability to change is when he accepts that he was being really nasty to Eva Smith. A quote that proves this is when he says he was in the state that a chap easily turns nasty. Your quote's done nothing there because you've already said he turns nasty. Just quote the words instead. And I go on to talk about how he has realised for himself who Eva Smith is in relation to himself, and that as he re-enters the room there, now this is this perceptive interpretation, and again my integrated support, look at me replacing my own words with text. As he re-enters the room and says, "You know, don't you?" It's a tacit admission of his own guilt and responsibility. When he narrates the tale and accepts that he was drunk and aggressive, he has clearly changed from the spoiled, in quotes, boy with his privileged, quote, varsity lifestyle. Now this gives me an opportunity to drop in a really useful nugget of context, that bit about Oxford and Cambridge and the privilege it offers there, just showing I really get how the context informs our interpretation of the play and changes the way we feel about it. And then going on to say that he's never had to work, and therefore he's developed an attitude that he can just take what he wants. You could link him to Gerald in that if you want to, but the danger of doing that is you're going to stray away from the focus of Eric and how he changes. And then I finish that paragraph with a really critical assured comment supported fully by the text. However, he accepts that Eva / Daisy's death is in part his own fault, and he not only grows up, he also sobers up. He changes from being in a, quote, queer, excitable mood to quietly returning to take his part in the inspector's case. So you can see throughout that paragraph how I'm dropping in context and how I'm dropping in quotations integrated into my writing in order to support really carefully everything that I'm saying. So remember those keywords then. We want an assured personal response. We want to really feel like these are your ideas, you believe in them, and you would back them up as being what is the case. How Priestley is trying to teach us something with this play. High level of engagement with the text, lots and lots of quotations sprinkled through. A nice critical style using those kind of words that you saw in my example paragraph to go back and see the way it's phrased for that critical, mature and perceptive understanding. Discerning references is an integral part of your response. You've chosen the best words to use and only the best words, not massive Greek quotes. And an excellent understanding of context, sprinkled in like spice and stirred through the whole essay, not dumped in a big lump at the beginning in your introduction. And my final reminder to you all, and please go to bed nice and early, rest, relax, do something nice this evening to switch off and just have downtime so that you sleep and go into that exam tomorrow morning at 9 AM ready to show what you know. Take care and God bless.